Final Fantasy along with Dragon Quest were two of the most influential console RPGs of all time and played a massive role in popularizing the genre. This video is going to look at some of the facts behind the classic RPG that started it all. You're watching Hellfire RPGs and this is Final Fantasy Know the Facts. Final Fantasy 1 was a huge success in Japan, presenting them with the second most popular RPG franchise in the country after Dragon Quest. Final Fantasy mastermind Hironobu Sakaguchi wanted to make an RPG long before Final Fantasy 1, but he couldn't get permission from Squaresoft because they didn't think it would sell. Instead, Sakaguchi spent his days designing games of other genres such as racers and shooters. Oh, and he also designed Nakayami Miho no Tokimeki High School, which is a dating sim and one of the forerunners for this kinky genre. It was, however, the success of Dragon Quest that proved RPGs could be commercially successful, and it's just what Sakaguchi needed to start the project for Final Fantasy. Now there's a common misconception that this game was named Final Fantasy because it was going to be the final game for Squaresoft as a company. After all, its previous games were not so successful. However, this is not the case. In a Famitsu interview, Sakaguchi stated the following: "There's an urban legend that the final in FF meant that this was our last project. While we were having some hard times back then, the truth is that as long as the title could be shortened to FF, any word would have been suffice. It was initially going to be Fighting Fantasy, but there was already a board game out with that same name. With that said, if the game wasn't a success, Sakaguchi himself was planning to return to university." And here's another fun fact: Final Fantasy was developed by a team of 7. Comparatively, nearly 300 people worked on Final Fantasy XII. Once you obtain the ship, if you spam the A and B buttons together 55 times in a row, you'll unlock a basic puzzle game. And guess what? If you solve it, you'll get a whopping 100 gil. That's nearly enough to buy a high potion. If you played the game on the NES, you may have noticed that some of the spells seem rather useless. The spells Saber and Temper are supposed to buff your party, but instead they do absolutely nothing. The intelligence stat also has absolutely no effect on the strength of spells. This means that a red mage could heal as effectively as a white mage. But it gets worse. The lock spell misses 100% of the time, and lock 2, which is supposed to decrease your enemy's evasion, actually increases it. Fortunately, most of these issues were addressed in later releases. We've all noticed those tombstones in Elfheim. Did you know that in the original English version they read, "Here lies Erdrick, 837 to 866, rest in peace." This was a bit of a jab at Enix, as the character Erdrick is constantly referenced in Dragon Quest and is also the protagonist in Dragon Quest 3. The interesting thing is that in the original Japanese version of the game, the tombstone actually references Link from the Legend of Zelda series, and in later remakes of the game, this reference has been changed back to Link. Yeah, and it goes without saying that those elves look a lot like Link. The battle system in Final Fantasy was something that gamers hadn't seen before, with most RPGs using a first-person or over-the-shoulder view for battle. Battle designer Hiroyuki Ito used professional sports as an inspiration, specifically American football. The similarities here are obvious, with its back-and-forth action, two teams taking turns on offense and defense, and the heavy emphasis on pre-planning and strategy. The developers also wanted to make it as close to the Dungeons & Dragons role-playing game as they could. In particular, elemental weaknesses such as zombies always being weak against fire or fire types being weak against ice. This was something that was ignored by JRPGs at that point in time. The majority of the game's monsters are also taken from the first edition of Dungeons & Dragons, including the Mind Flayer and the Oku. Many enemies are modelled directly after their counterparts in Dungeons & Dragons, but there was a limit to what they could do without violating copyright laws. For example, there was originally an enemy named the Beholder, but this was changed to Evil Eye to avoid a lawsuit. There are some tunes from the Final Fantasy universe that stick in our minds like glue. The Victory Fanfare is one such tune. Here's an interesting fact: in 2015, professional WWE wrestler Xavier Woods played the Victory Fanfare with his trombone.
You still got one more match to go. Don't let your focus go astray, for behold your partners. The new day.
This was Final Fantasy Know the Facts. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments if there's another Know the Facts that you want to see. Until next time.